All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The Village of Armada Zoning Board of Appeals semi-annual regular meeting for Thursday, November 14th, 2019 will be called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everybody. That was pretty pitiful, but just listening to myself. Okay, I'm kind of going to act as the secretary, which I am, and be the acting chair since Mike, I guess, is sick tonight. I hope he doesn't have what I have because it's not been pleasant. All right, so St. John is not here. The vice chair position is unfilled. Belkey is here. DePalma? Here. Patterson?
Here.
And Lemieux?
Here.
Okay. Oops, I guess I got it. All right. I'm confusing myself here with, I must have had a double sign-in roster going around, but I've got everybody's signature, so we're good. And be Mark. Mike is not present. Okay. Very good. So I'm going to wind up kind of taking my own notes, so this may proceed a little bit slowly. I don't think it's going to take long for the meeting, but it may be an extra second or two because I gotta talk it, then I gotta take notes, I gotta track any motions and that type of thing. Okay. First order of business here is to approve the agenda. Now I've got two pieces of paper in front of you. One is the agenda that was posted, and it just says agenda. And then I've got a revised agenda. And what I propose to do with the agenda, just two things. We had a note about path forward for Channel 6 taping. Channel 6 is actually here, so that's great. We did talk about it and voted on it at the last meeting, and I had forgotten when I wrote up the agenda that it did get passed to Joe, and Joe was working it, and she had indicated that she was going to be here, and so there was no need to have that in the general business. And so I've taken that and simply moved it up into the chair comments so that I can comment on it in a second. And then the next thing is I made a change in the general business items. I just rearranged the order of two of the bullets down there just so that things would flow a little bit better. So I would propose to modify the agenda as just discussed. Any discussion on that? Okay. Would somebody make a motion on the revised agenda?
Motion to approve revised agenda.
Second.
Okay. Motion. This is where I got to do the right part. Motion made by Dennis and seconded by Christie to revise the agenda. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? No? Okay. Motion's passed. Thank you. Next order of business is to review the minutes from 18 April. It's been over 6 months since we met. For those that were here at the time, please take a look and see if that matches your recollection. All right, as people get done here, Dennis, I assume you're going to abstain since you weren't here for the meeting. Do I have any comments on the meeting minutes? Any changes noted that we need to put into the agenda? If not, can I hear a motion to accept the meeting minutes as written?
So,
Motion.
second.
Accept.
Okay. Motion by Don, seconded by Christie to accept the minutes as written. Any further discussion on that?
And then you know now that they're approved, they have to go to the clerk.
Yep, I'm gonna sign off a copy of that. Routinely, what I forget to do is have a sign-in roster, so far so good, and I'm gonna sign the meeting minutes, and it will be 2 for 2 this time around. Okay, any further discussion on meeting minutes? If none, all approve. That's why we do these things on a semi-annual basis, because if you don't do them for a while, you get screwed up. All in favor of meeting minutes being accepted as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions?
Same.
Okay, Dennis is going to abstain. And there's no nays, so the meeting minutes are accepted as written. I'm going to sign this thing, and we will be good. Becky will be proud of me. I think what we'll do is take that copy. Okay. Gonna get the agenda out of the way and put the revised agenda here. I want to thank Joe and Channel 6 for taking the time to come out and tape the ZBA. The ZBA, every time it gets taped, with one of these semi-annual meetings, will probably look rusty. And again, as kind of indicated, that's why we do these on a semi-annual basis. It's not infrequent to go without these meetings for a year, year and a half, 2 years. You never meet. And you don't even recognize who's on the board, let alone remember what the procedures are. That's why we kept forgetting to do sign-in rosters and stuff like that, because we just weren't meeting on a regular basis. So council graciously approved 2 meetings during the year to take care of administrative things, and that's what's going to happen tonight. This is not an appeal meeting. That's normally where we do our business. I think the last appeal that we had to deal with were actually, there were 3 of them in one night. Everything since, and that's been about 2 years now. And everything since then has been on the basis of these regular meetings. And so just an opportunity to discuss any issues, concerns that you have related to the zoning review process, the zoning ordinance, desire for training, that type of stuff. We do have a couple things to talk about tonight from past actions, but again, thank you for Channel 6 for coming. I think these will be of interest to some of the citizens, get a chance to look at them. Second, I want to welcome Dennis Lemieux. That's a great capture on the ZBA, the board here, because Dennis was the code enforcer and the building inspector a year or so ago, and So he obviously knows the process, and he knows it from a different perspective. And having that diversity of experiences and perspective on the ZBA just helps us make better decisions, I think. So Dennis, welcome.
Okay.
I was very happy to see you want to serve. Okay, on to general business. I'm going to ask, I don't know that anybody's going to jump up, but so as you know from the last meeting, because I was elected to council back this last December and took a position in January, we had to change me out as the ZBA chair. We had Don Hugh as the secretary. I think Mike was the co-chair at the time, and because we had to do that shake-up because of the zoning ordinance, the stipulations of the zoning ordinance, we went through elections, and the bottom line of it shook out that Mike St. John became the chair. We had nobody that wanted to take on vice chair, so that's an open position, and I took on the secretary position. And you two guys are standing members. So we do have a position of vice chair that's open, and if anybody is interested in that, I'll let you speak up. Would certainly help Mike out. Without that position being filled, then I will continue to help Mike. We're just gonna get Mike to show up. He's gotta not be sick, right? Or it'd be about as sick as me, and then he could come and we could both communicate back to each other, give each other what the other guy has got, but we would make the meeting work. So any particular interest in any of the three members here in becoming the vice chair? Okay, all right. Thank you for that. The next item is interest in planning and zoning training. The village does provide an opportunity to go to the Planning Institute. I think they still run that in Mount Clemens. It runs on a fairly regular basis. It's a long class, but I would tell you I took it back when I first came on the Planning Commission. Found it very valuable. It really helped to coalesce in my mind what the process was from a planning perspective. And then when I got on the Zoning Board of Appeals, I was able to grasp that fairly quickly as well, and what the role was. So if there's any interest at all in planning or training, let me know. You don't have to tell me here, just let me know, and I will work to get you set up for that.
You might, just a comment, you might, if something does come up, just kind of send the word out, you know.
I can definitely do that. I've got, I think, phone numbers for all of you guys and email addresses. They seem to work. I do have Mike's number. He's got an off-grid number, but I've got it, I've gotten him, so I know I can track him down. Excuse me.
The engineers have periodic classes too that's beneficial to the ZBA as well as planning, so you're always invited to those as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, especially if you stick around with it for a while. But yeah, I've got the ability to contact you guys, and so as I hear about these things, I will let you know. And you're certainly welcome to attend. I'll work that piece. Next item is statute and ordinances governing building and code enforcement. We brought this up, and this is where the order changed because for a while now at some of the past semi-annual meetings, we had worked a couple issues related to abandoned signs in the village. Primarily, you're going to find abandoned signs in the business districts. In some cases in industrial, and actually we even had what could have been constituted as an abandoned sign over in a residential area, although it's under private ownership now, so it's theirs to kind of do with what they want to do. You might recall that from a little while back. And so, because we had an issue with one of the abandoned signs, I had to work with our new code enforcer and the deputy clerk, and I needed to try to understand what some of the issues were as well. So I don't want to go into it in a whole lot of detail, but the Village Code of Ordinances has two components of it that deal with building regulations, and these are under Title 8, and it's Chapter 81. It's the thicker packet here. It's general building regulations, and I had all this stuff nicely highlighted, and I didn't print your copies off in color. So unfortunately, you can probably see a little shading where the titles are and so on. But there's Chapter 81, general building regulations, and there's Chapter, I want to say it's 82, which is property maintenance. So the building codes is obviously under Chapter 81, and just very briefly, this helped me understand why Dennis, as the building inspector in the past, had worried himself about floodplain maps and so on, because it's here, and it directs the building inspector to have to deal with that as part of his job. It also says that the building inspector or inspectors are primarily focused on 4 areas, which is building code, plumbing code, electrical code, and mechanical code, and that's why we had Dennis and other inspectors that were subject matter experts in their particular areas doing these types of inspections. And within there you'll find that they talk about how the codes are enforced and what the process is and so on. It's worth taking a look at if you're not really familiar with it. I want to go to Chapter 82, which is property maintenance. And property maintenance, for the most part, now done by the code enforcer. They use the International Property Maintenance Code, and in our case, the 2006 edition. And there's newer editions, and at some point in time, the village council may decide to upgrade and adopt to a 2010 or a 2019 version. Right now we're using the 2006 version that seems to serve us fairly well. And in that chapter of Title 8, again, it talks about what the responsibilities are, the enforcement process, the types of things that you can look at. And I do remember from a while back where the property maintenance chapter was strengthened because we had some issues in the village that the code was not able to deal with. There was nothing in the code that dealt with it. And so I know Dennis worked with the council back, this is what, 10 years ago? Something like that. 10 years ago, it strikes me. But in any case, the zoning ordinance was, code of ordinances were updated to include additional information in there about things that we were starting to see in the village, and it gave us the leverage to deal with them. And code enforcement is done for the good of everybody. At the same time, while we try to be respectful of the individual, right? This becomes important in this discussion simply because we've had to deal with the abandoned signs, and in the case of one of the signs, we had to get into the property maintenance section and then go into the international code to really determine what the outcome was going to be. So with that, I'm gonna set it aside for a minute and talk about the abandoned sign removal and status. So again, about 1.5 years, we identified 3 abandoned signs in the downtown C1 and C2 districts, and then I believe the area down the street is a C2, was a C2, down on Fulton. It was pre-existing, and so it was grandfathered in as a as a commercial area, just a small segment down mid-Fulton Street. We looked at the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance was not quite clear as to what the path forward was. If you might recall, the path forward said that the zoning board of appeals could look at abandoned sign issues and make a determination. But the question was not that we couldn't make a determination, it's how does the issue get before the zoning board of appeals? The zoning board of appeals, was the zoning board of appeals able to go out and unilaterally challenge a sign, or did the issue need to get brought before us? Because there was that discontinuity in the language and nobody quite understood what the proper process was at the time, Dennis is the code enforcer and I was the chair of the ZBA. With the ZBA's permission, we jointly signed a letter. I thought it was a very respectful letter, and sent it to the 3 business owners and said, hey, we've noticed that you got a sign that appears to be abandoned. We would ask you to do one of 2 things. Either take it down or make sure it's in compliance with building code and put sign copy in it. In other words, these were signs that had frames and there was nothing in it. And in some cases, there was nothing in these sign frames for a number of years. And so it was appropriate to take action on it. Two of the owners fairly quickly took the signs down. The 3rd owner did not take the sign down, and we had to contact them repeatedly about the issue and suggest we were going to have to take stronger action if nothing happened. Eventually they did get in contact with us, and for a period of time they were going to take the sign down. Then for a period of time they were thinking about selling and didn't want to take the sign down because they were going to use it as a as part of their sales deal. And then again, nothing happened for several more months, and the sign is, frankly, it's still up. Long story short, we finally did suggest we were going to have to take action and do a notice, and that's where the second piece of paper comes in, which is the International Property Maintenance Code, and it talks about Section 106, which is the violation process. You have to give a notice of violation, and then there's a Section 107, which talks about the actual form and format of the notice. So it became pretty clear that if we didn't do that, nothing was going to happen. And we did threaten to do that, and then at that point the owner came back and said, well, they've got a land contract, and it's like, and so this is where it even gets worse, you know. So if the issue had been fixed to begin with, probably wouldn't have had to go this far. This is all going to look good on tape. Belky choking up here. Is that there is a component of Section 107 that says if you've been served with a notice of violation, you cannot transfer the property. You have to fix the item before somebody new takes possession of it. And you can imagine how dissatisfied a new buyer would be if they bought a place and had an abandoned sign. They probably paid extra because there's a sign frame out there, only to find out that it's been abandoned and there's a potential violation and it's out of code, out of the building code, and so on and so on, right? So luckily for us, we had by the time that we were told that a land contract had been signed, we had already served the notice of violation. And so since then, on this third abandoned sign, they have now been further told that they have 90 days to bring the sign in compliance. or take it down, which is kind of what we started out with about a year and a half ago. And at this point, it's in writing, and we would expect some definitive action. And frankly, we really don't care if the current owner takes care of it, or the new owner who's now aware of it takes care of it. It's just that it either gets signed copy put in it and it's brought up to code, or it's taken down, which is, well, again, what we try to do for the last year and a half. So it's unfortunate it's taken this long. I've always found in past dealings with the code enforcer that if there's a reasonable opportunity to work with the owner to fix the problem, the village will do that. The village tries to not be heavy-handed. It usually comes to a bad conclusion when the village asks nicely and respectfully and nothing happens for an extended period of time, right? So I just wanted to give a little context. Dennis, I'm sure, is very familiar with it. It's interesting that he's here tonight as a new member, but I wanted to give some context to you guys how this goes. But we've got a couple things out of it. We now know that, yes, we can deal with abandoned signs. We absolutely have the ability to make a determination. There is a process in the zoning ordinance that we have to follow. We would absolutely follow that. But the issue has to be brought before us. We cannot unilaterally go out and tell somebody they have an abandoned sign and tell them we're going to make a decision about it. It needs to be brought to us. Primarily it would come by the code enforcer or by the village council. The second thing is the third abandoned sign is going to be dealt with one way, shape, form, or another, which is the appropriate thing to do, because the zoning ordinance attempts to ensure that the community is, the property and the look of the community and all of that is for the betterment of everybody, not for people to take advantage of. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
If I'm not mistaken, they altered that sign. They did an art sculpture of flowers at the base of it.
Right.
They removed the sign completely. There's nothing left but the sculpture at the bottom portion of it. So it's no longer a sign, it's a piece of art in their yard.
Well, we've got no issue with the sculpture, and if they've done something over the last day or two, then I've not seen it. But the last time I looked at it, which was about a week ago, the frame was still there, the fluorescent lights were still up on the top. So if they've done something here recently, that's great.
No, I thought they removed the fluorescent lights and the sign frame, everything, but the bracket and the sculpture.
I'll take a look at it, Joe, but I think the frame is, I want to say the frame's there. I'll stop on my way tonight, because that would be great if they took it down. I mean, again, their option. We weren't trying to have them get rid of the sign. I was more hoping that we would have a business in there of some type, because it's a nice little structure. It's been cleaned up on the outside, looks cute, and put sign copy on there, right? But it appeared, at least this last weekend when I went by it, that the sign was still there. I've not been in communication with the folks that own it. We mean no ill will towards the folks that own it. If that was part of their flower, just decoration out there or whatever, I was unaware of it. I don't know that they've said anything to Tom Urban or Becky about that. I'm not aware of that. So I would assume that they would write something back that says, "Hey, we're incorporating this in with the rest of the structure." But I'll take a look tonight. If they've taken it down, that's great. My preference would have been they would have fixed it up and used it. But it's been abandoned. It's been sitting empty for so many years. It's easy to look past it. But I've been looking at that thing now for 20 years, wondering why it's that way and why somebody didn't do something.
What's the new business that bought it, do you know?
I do not know.
Okay.
I do not know. I can ask Ben perhaps. That may not even have gone to planning,
Mhm.
It hasn't.
especially if the inside of the building's not been,
They haven't come to planning.
I'm sorry.
They have not come to planning yet.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you would know. Now, just thinking, we were looking at the planning notes from the other day, so. Okay, so any questions about that? It's like I say, a long story. But I guess, you know, hopefully for everybody, it has worked itself out now, so. Okay, here nothing about those two items. Then we've got, really the last bullet is, we'll set the tentative date for the next semi-annual regular ZBA meeting. Again, I'm assuming that it's going to be an administrative meeting with no appeals before us. Now, we could get an appeal at any time. I'm not aware of any that are up and coming. So, I would recommend 16 April. It's about 5 months away. Frankly, the reason this meeting was not in October as originally planned was because we were working the sign issue and trying to figure out what the outcome was going to be and how to proceed with it. And it kind of all coalesced in the latter part of October. So. So this is about 5 months now. Hard to believe it's going to be 2020, but I recommend on or about the 16th, and we all come back, see each other one more time, and just kind of grease the wheels a little bit. But I'm open to any other dates if anybody's got a thought about that. Okay, can I hear a proposal then for the 16th?
All right, a motion to set the next ZBA regular meeting for April 16th, 2020. And at 7 p.m.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, Christie and Don for 16 April. See if I can end strong here. 7 o'clock. Okay, any other comment on that? All in favor? Aye. Nays? No nays? Motion
Something
passed.
you might want to designate is your regular administrative meetings are just that. They are meetings. When you have an appeal, it is a public hearing.
Yes, absolutely.
You're a quasi-motor court at that point.
That's a good point. Yes, they usually are public hearings. Of course, anybody is welcome to come to this too. It's an open meeting, and we'd love to have a couple people sit out there every once in a while. That's a great comment, Joe. I appreciate that. So obviously the next bullet is public comment. There's no public here to comment, so we'll move past that. Any final board comments? Ideas for improvements? Future issues to discuss? You can send them to me anytime. You've got my emails as well, and I can certainly, if you've got an idea or something you want to talk to at the next administrative, next semi-annual regular meeting, which, as Joe says, it's really an administrative meeting. It's not an appeal meeting. Let me know, and I'll put it on the agenda.
Another thing that I would urge you guys to really recommend is that any of the new members attend the training. As a long-term past ZBA member, it's imperative that you know what you're talking about. So those training sessions are very, very crucial.
They are, and again, the village will take care of it. I think the way the village does it, Joe, now is you gotta go and take the class, and then you get reimbursed. That way the village doesn't pay, and something happens midway through and you gotta bail out and you don't complete, and then, right, and it makes sense to me. And
Probably about 10 years ago when I was on the township zoning board for about a year, we kind of went by, there was a rule, like, people would have to show why they wanted a variance. They would have to prove to the board why they wanted it, you know, and it was, what's the hardship? Why can't you comply?
Yeah, what's the burden?
So basically, the board would sit back and wait for the, you know, the person to state their case, and then we could ask questions, you know. But basically, you can't just say, well, I know Joe Schmo, you know, he's a buddy, we're gonna give him, you know, and that's kind of the rule we need to go by, I think, you know, as a board.
No, and actually, I think we do. When we first started getting together, and Christie wasn't on at the time, Don was, so he went through that, and it was a bit painful, because we had several meetings before the first appeal to kind of get ready, and so we went through what were the rules, and we had a couple adjustments in there, and we had some training, and then we actually did revise the appeal paperwork, so that it clearly talks about that in there. I'll send you a copy of the appeal.
It's not a bad idea for everybody, you know, especially myself, being newer to it. But, you know, that's kind of like the general feeling. Even Ray Township, where I work with the building department, we'll get a comment from John Chu, a landowner who wants to split his property. Well, now the building on the site is not in compliance with setback. So,
right.
You know, and you have to kind of note that, hey, here's a problem. You know, it's up to ZBA to say yay or nay.
Yeah. No, well,
what's the hardship? You know.
Yeah, your point is well taken, and because I don't think anybody here, nor does the village proper, want to take anybody's money, especially if they're not prepared to make their case. And so what we simply said, it's kind of like the letter that we cooked up for the abandoned signs. We said, hey, it is your responsibility to demonstrate your hardship, right? And if you can't do that, then you may not want to file an appeal, because you're going to spend X amount of money, and you're probably going to get shot down, right? And because we got to follow the ordinance unless you can prove why you need a variance from that. So yeah, so I'll send you a copy. It should be up now in the village website. I'm pretty positive it's there under the ZBA piece, but I'll pull it and send it to you. And we worked on that as well after the appeal meeting, just to make sure that that people had that chance to go, oh, well, I'm not going to sign off and spend this money because I haven't thought through why I'm bringing this forward. I just don't like it. Okay, we all know that, but you got to be able to explain why it's particularly hard for you, and you can't let it stand, and you have to have it changed. And it's got to be something that's got some weight to it, not just that you think it's unfair.
Correct.
Right. So point well taken. And I'll get that to you. Any other comments from you two? So Mike missed a good meeting. He could have been here, right? He could have run this whole thing. Okay, well, if no other comments, actually we did pretty good time-wise. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. We got a second?
Second. Okay.
The time is 7:42. 7:42. So that was Dennis and Don. I'm getting pretty good at this chair and secretary thing. Okay, all in favor? Adjournment? Aye. Nays? Of course, no. All right, thanks for coming on a cold night. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Channel 6 and Joe, appreciate it. Joe, I'm sure you'll hear if there's any comments that come back, anybody that's watched this. All right, well, thank you very much.